Recording now. Thanks for making the time for us.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for
the invitation.
Opportunity.
So we just like to give each candidate a chance to tell us a quick bit about why you're running and why voters should support you. So, Eileen, why don't you go first?
Okay. My name is Eileen Kiely. I am retired from Daimler Trucks North America. I was a financial controller for them. And I had intended a nice quiet retirement here in Central Oregon. And 2016 happened. I started getting more involved, and as I got involved and spoke with other people, people started asking me to speak for them. And in particular, I was very concerned about the Republican tax cuts that went down last December, because a lot of the things that were being said about it were simply not true. Not true about how to grow our economy, and certainly not true about how corporations make financial decisions. And I feel that we have essentially, on the progressive side, lost control of the financial narrative. And we need to take it back. We need to understand that progressive values aren't just nice, warm, fuzzy things. They are the things that grow our economy. And so what I want to do is I want to get into the legislature because our budget is our values as a state. And I would like to get in and work on the budget and work with other legislators in order to bring these problems, to bring these programs that will help us to get them paid for, get them executed, get them done so that we can actually take care of the people of Oregon. One of the concerns, of course, is healthcare. I'm very happy with Measure 101, happy that it passed in our legislative district, in fact. But it's a start. It's not a finish. We still haven't covered everyone. Here in Central Oregon, Deschutes County, we still have 14% of our population that is not covered by healthcare. And we have 22% that pay our own healthcare. We have to help these people get covered because this is a significant financial burden on people. And when they're stressed about their finances, they can't take care of the rest of their lives. So we need to help people get through this point and get onto a healthier lifestyle, but also feeling better about their lives because they don't have this burden over their heads. And I think we all have friends that are going to be working into their 80s because they had some sort of a health care issue that essentially wiped out their retirement. Sure. And my friends don't want to see that happen to somebody else. And I would like to be part of that solution.
Thanks.
Bill? Well, I'm Bill Trumble, and Eileen and I, of course, are running for District 53 State Representative. Like Eileen, it was national issues that got me interested. I've watched what I considered to be real damage being done. We lost civility, we lost compassion, we lost the will to govern. And it made me realize that I needed to do something besides complain, and that I have some ideas that I think work for Oregon. And so I've thrown my hat in the ring. We'll see how it works. I think the difference among all the candidates is going to be experience. And so I'm a Navy veteran, I'm a PhD scientist, I've been a teacher and researcher, became a university administrator. I've served on state conservation commissions, state water board, as chairman of a 9-state agricultural experiment station group. And in that time, I got to write legislation for the Farm Bill. I got to write and review legislation for the state of New Hampshire. I then went on to become a provost and vice president of academic affairs at 2 different universities. I think that this gives me a whole lot of experience that's going to be useful. I believe that people have the ability to make a difference in communities, and so I've always been a community activist. In Redmond, I've been the chair of my homeowners association. In New York, when I lived there, president of a Grass River Heritage Foundation, which did education, built parks, heritage work. So I've always been involved even in town water boards. So I have a lot of issues that I hope you'll ask about. I have proposed a solution for PERS, some innovative ideas to help our education system, some for the environment, and I'm really happy to talk about those because I think I can hit the ground running in Salem and make a difference.
Okay. Well, before we get into some of those issues, Eileen, would you like to speak about any government experience or organizing experience that might contribute to your candidacy?
I'm also a Navy vet. I went into the Navy, never intended to do this. It was a real surprise. The Iranian hostage crisis is what got me to get in, because it was that awakening slap that I received that I led a very privileged life. I had a lot of benefits, a lot of people helping me get there, and it was as an American, particularly as an American woman at that time, I had received so much that I realized it was time for me to give back. So I joined the Navy at that point, and I went through officer candidate school and served 4 years active, 10 years total. Otherwise, I have not served in other government capacities. I've been on the board of 2 homeowners associations, and as a member, I was a climb leader for the Mazamas and worked on several of the educational committees and climbing committee itself, and worked with the organization that way.
Okay. Should we tackle the big dog first?
Let's do the big dog. It starts with a P, doesn't it?
What is the big dog?
The big dog is PERS.
Yes. Any volunteers to go first?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
PERS, in my opinion, is a legacy debt that we can fix. It exists because we brought in some Wall Street folks to tell us years ago, back in '75, that we would be able to receive a payout from the retirement system that may have seemed reasonable at the time, but was too large to go forward with, and it generated a fairly large debt. As I said, we no longer have a defined benefit for people who join the retirement system now. We have a defined contribution, all right? But we have to attack the problem now rather than talk around it. So, over the next 20 years, we will lose a number of people from the PERS retirement system, the Tier 1 folks. Many of those will eventually pass away, and that will be reduced. And we'll reduce the cost by 50%. But we need to take another 50% and pay down that debt so that the $25 billion can go away for the future of Oregon. And my proposal is that we raise the by the glass excise tax on beer and wine, not from the liquor store, not from the grocery store, but by the glass, from the lowest in the nation to 1/2 of the national average. So I've looked at all of the states. The highest is Tennessee. They charge $1.47 per glass. The average is very close to 50 cents. And Oregon charges 0.8 cents per glass, not 1 penny. If we raise it to 25 cents, we would bring in $750 million a year. I dedicate that to paying down PERS exclusively. And in 20 years, basically the same time that Representative Walden was our representative in District 53, we can solve that problem and remove that debt.
Taxing the beer of people in Bend is the most radical thing I think anyone's ever spoken in this office. It's just radical politics. Are
Yes.
you prepared for the
Yes, and there will be a backlash, but it is an opportunity to have all the people who come to Oregon and enjoy everything that's here from California or anywhere else, help us pay this debt down. And so the answer to your question is yes, I'm ready for a serious blowback. But if we continue to say, gee, what are we going to do? Just talk around it? We'll not get there. I can solve, or we can solve, this problem in 20 years. And it's gone on since 1975. I think it's time to do something. And we'll take that challenge. It's still 1/2 of the national average. And it's even less than that because we don't have a sales tax. We don't have an in-house tax for consumption. So Oregon does not have those things that many other states do.
Yeah, and I am saying that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I do think if people are going to address PERS, I think coming forward with ideas that sound as radical as a beer tax are probably needed at this time.
I guess as the devil's advocate, I would say that continually people put the tax on the sin stuff. There's always the sin tax, and so what would you say to those people who say, this is another sin tax, why are we always doing that?
Because this tax level has not changed in 40 years. Doesn't matter if it's a sin tax, I don't look at it as that. I look at it as an opportunity for the state and anyone who visits and enjoys what is here to contribute to solving a problem that is holding back Oregon. And I think it is the simplest, most reasonable, most doable solution that we have offered at the moment. Eileen?
Okay. So the biggest problem we have with PERS is everybody thinks it's one problem. And it's not. It's a very large group of problems. So let's talk about how we break it down, because as a controller, that was my job. Mm-hmm. Let's break it down a problem and let's figure out how to solve it. So the first thing is we have our current employees. And right now, we're a little over 60% of our current employees are on the 2003 plan, which is entirely different. It was actually led by Senator Canuck when he was in the House. And he declared this is fiscally sound and sustainable. And in the last 15 years, the annual reports have said yes, it is fiscally sound and sustainable. So this is not about current employees. It's not your kid's third grade teacher. They didn't cause this. It's not our cops. Those people have already started to move on to the new plan. And of course, anybody who comes into the system at this point, we're going to grow people that are on the sustainable plan. And we will start to shrink people that are on the plan that is essentially unsustainable for many reasons. And Bill's right, it's a legacy debt. We started it in 1975 at periods of extremely high inflation. And the state did not want to pay increases to public employees commensurate with the double-digit inflation that we experienced over about a decade. So instead, they traded off a safe retirement. And one of those things, of course, that everybody talks about is the 8% guarantee. But you have to remember, you were getting double-digit on T-bills at the time. So 8% was pretty reasonable. As the program progressed, we actually were actuarially sound for a couple of decades, even with this program. In 1996, when interest rates had dropped considerably, then we dropped the 8% and went to a variable market rate. And they also made a few other changes to make it more sustainable in the long term. So that was the 1996 reforms. We were stable in that until the 2001-2002 crash, which is what brought about the 2003 reforms. So going forward, 2003, that's taken care of. We have this legacy problem that unfortunately we are under-reserved for. In business, when you have a liability that's going to last over the long term, you reserve for it. and you figure into it all of these rates about how your savings are going to grow and such. It's a normal thing. The problem is we are under-reserved. We were under-reserved to start with, and then we have the 2008 crash, and we have not recovered from the 2008 crash. So right now we're looking at an unfunded liability that there are various estimates of it between 22 billion and 25 billion over the next 20 years. Right? Our payout right now in PERS statewide is about $4 billion. That's going to grow to $8 billion. It is. And we're going to have to pay for it. Because anything that we do going forward cannot affect what we already guaranteed in the prior program. And we've tried it. The Morrow decision in 2013 said you cannot mess around with what's already been contractually granted. The Morrow decision also gave us, however, some other openings. For example, you can change your tax policies on it. So while Tier 1 employees are guaranteed a tax benefit, they took away what would have been a tax benefit for non-residents. And we can look at tax policy on non-residents to see if we can recover some of that money. But it's going to take more money. There is only way to solve this. We are going to have to find revenue. And I'm saying this from a business standpoint too. If our reserves are under-reserved, we divert revenue into our reserves and reduce our profits. So we're going to have to find more revenue. I think, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I mean, because it just reminds me, like when I have your Republican counterparts at the table, they will tell me that there's far too much revenue and that we need to just cut services.
If there's far too much revenue, we should just be able to divert 20-some billion into that fund right now, and then there's no PERS problem. The only problem with PERS is that we are not reserved for it.
Right.
We do not have the funds to cover the long-term liability. So the question then becomes, all right, if we have all this revenue in the world, let's just put it in PERS. What do you want to cut? Do we cut our kids? Do we cut our cops?
Our promises.
Do we cut our health care? Do we break the promises that we've made to the people of Oregon? Do we do that, or do we take a look at our revenue system, which right now we're collecting 11 times as much in individual taxes as we are in corporate taxes? As a corporate controller, I assure you that we never, ever, ever made a decision based on income taxes. In fact, I wrote the income statements for Daimler Trucks North America for 2.5 years, and what was not on them is income tax. We took all of our taxes, shipped them up to the tax group in Germany. They rolled it up with other corporate expenses and rolled it back out to all of the locations as a corporate allocation. So our CFO didn't even know what we paid in income taxes.
So Oregonians, as we saw.
I'm sorry, I said CFO, it's CEO. The CFO signed it, but the CEO didn't even look at it.
So
not part of his job.
Oregonians have loosened up a little bit about tax increases, but do you believe that it's palatable to pass a tax increase for the kind of, at the kind of levels you're talking about? Because I assume that's where you're going when we're talking
We're
about
gonna have to.
revenue.
We're gonna have to get revenue. We're gonna have to get revenue. And
Is it
here's-
palatable in this day and age for
Well,
Oregonians?
Here's the other thing. The more we grow our economy, the less the tax increase has to be. But you can't cut your way out of a problem like this because you risk cutting the very things that grow our economy, like education. Okay? We may not get an immediate return on education, but we get a big return on education. We are not going to attract the kind of employers that are going to give us living wage jobs unless we have an educated workforce. And we're not going to get there by starving our schools.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So,
Can
am
I-
I clear,
Yeah,
am I
let's-
clear
let's-
that you're
I believe
you're
we need an increase.
expressly stating that you want to increase the corporate tax
I
rate?
am expressly stating, no, I'm expressly stating that we need to actually redo our corporate tax structure. Because what tends to happen, and I know people are very skilled in this, is that we will create a tax benefit for small business, and a company like mine can drive a semi-truck through that. And we do that consistently. When we give away property tax breaks for, when localities and municipalities give away tax breaks in order to get a business to expand there, if they're giving away, if they're giving away property tax that's dedicated to schools, what they're really doing is shifting that burden onto all of us, because Measure 5 says all that money goes in a bucket and that the state is going to fund the schools.
I mean,
So-
let me stop you right there and let Bill weigh in as
Okay.
well.
Okay, you asked, are Oregonians receptive to an increase in tax? I think yes, more now than in the past. And so the real problem is that we've not done a very good job of explaining what benefit comes with an increase in taxes when it comes to people. And so PERS is a perfectly good example. When you can say, we have this legacy debt and it is weighing us down like an anchor, and our ship can't move out to where it needs to be, you can convince people that there is a reason. You can do that, I think, for corporate taxes. And I believe that large corporations are not paying their fair share, and I think there's an opportunity for them too. Measure 97 didn't pass because it wasn't sold well. And I think a much better job could have been done. And one of the things that I would do is I would reintroduce a 97-like measure that would increase taxes on large corporations, those making over 25 million. But I think it needs to be done in a manner that involves all of the legislature and involves selling why you're doing it, not just that you're going to do it and the dollars that come as a result, but why you're going to do it. I have a list, I keep a running list of bills or issues I'd like to introduce in Salem, into the Oregon legislature. And of those things that I want to actually try to enact into law, the biggest consideration is how do you sell it and how do you get support through the legislature to make it possible to bring it forward and have it accepted. And so the answer to your question is yes, I think it is more time. This is a time when people are more receptive, but you have to sell it, and we've not done a good job of it.
So let me bring it, localize it then. You know, both of you are running in a pretty red district. Is your district palatable to tax increases? And if you believe so, I mean, clearly you're both running on that kind of measure. How do you sell it to your district?
Yeah, Measure 97 may have been the least popular thing on the ballot in our district in 2016. That's the truth. I thought it was, I mean, it was flawed for many reasons, but I liked the creativity of it. I really did. Plus the fact I really liked that we started talking about small businesses versus large businesses. Because, you know, we want to encourage small businesses. And I don't think there's anything wrong with giving a hand up in terms of access to capital to small businesses so they can grow. Large businesses are supposed to be getting their capital from their revenue. So, but there's a couple things that we need to get people to understand. And you heard this really loudly in the Measure 97 campaign, is that, oh, we'll have to increase prices. Businesses will have to increase prices.
Yeah.
Anytime you hear a large corporation say, oh, well, we'll just have to pass it on, then they don't know if they can pass it on. Because I worked for Daimler through the EPA transitions of 2004, 2007, 2010, and 2014. And we had to pass an increase on every time. The biggest of which was 2010, because we had to go to a brand new technology with the after treatment. And we all pushed on the really large trucks. We pushed through $9,000 increase into a recession. And we got it because the market had changed and it allowed us to get it. So we didn't complain about what we had to push through. It happened. And the interesting thing about it is because everybody had to do it, it was taken care of, and the market was paying, because essentially it was helping the market pay for the cost of the greenhouse gases and the particulates that we were removing.
Do you think District 53 is enjoying that kind of economy?
Enjoying that kind of economy? No. But what I think is happening is that we need to continue to invest in those small businesses that are in District 53. And to do that, we really need to define the difference between large corporations and small corporations, not based on the way they file their taxes, but based on how much money do they make in Oregon versus how much do they contribute to Oregon in terms of living wage jobs, in terms of property taxes, in terms of contributing to the community that they're in, as opposed to, you know, it's, oh, well, we'll give a tax break to S-corps. Well, great, you just give a tax break to Donald Trump, have him build a hotel here. He doesn't need it.
Right.
Large corporations don't need that kind of tax break because the capital is coming from their revenues.
Sure.
And that's why they're investing in their own stock instead of opening up new factories and hiring people. Because the only reason to do that is because it allows you to increase your revenue. If there's not money out there to be gotten, you're not going to make those investments.
Bill?
53, District 53 is rural and it's pretty red. So it's an uphill climb, if you will. And yet, everything comes down to give and take in negotiations. And so if you're going to ask for something, you have to be giving something back as well. And part of it, and that's, I think, an approach that we have to really be very careful with in District 53. So, okay, I want an idling ban. You can't ban your car, you can't run your car or truck for more than 3 minutes without turning it off. All right, but I have to give something back as well. And I'd like a $15 minimum wage. You know, that's going to cost something. But people in 53 say, wait a minute, that would make a difference for me. And that might be the difference in paying my rent. And so all of a sudden, what looked terrible begins to work. We're very rural, and one of the biggest economy pieces is agriculture in a funny way, because in 53 we grow food, and it's mostly for local restaurants and local use. And as a dean of agriculture, I can talk to these people about that. So when I do, we want to offer something that helps them, like more support for cooperative extension, let's say, that helps them learn how to do this, all right? And for that, I want them to give me support for increased career and technical education. And so presented, I think, in a way where there's some give and take, and where it's not just, we're going to bleed you dry by 1,000 cuts. If you do that, if you're seen as tax and spend, that's the kiss of death. But if you are willing to say, this is what I'm going to give you in return, have some ideas for education, and in return, maybe I'm going to want help metering all of the water that we use in District 53. Those canals leak 40 to 50% of our water. We have enough water, but we're not using it well. We have to use a certain amount of water in irrigation, or we lose, the people who have these rights, lose that allocation, and it's reduced for next year. That's ridiculous. Water that's not being used could be returned to the Deschutes, except we don't allow it through our own legislation, our own approach through the water districts that we're using. So the answer is,
You're getting right on to his next story.
it has to
He's going to want
be,
to talk to you about that.
it has to be give and take, I think, and you ask for something, but you consider what you give in return.
Right. Nicole, did you have a question?
I actually wanted to
Go
get
ahead.
back to that.
Sure.
Because there's a lot being said about, oh, 53 is a red district. You know, we've got 52, almost 53,000 voters in the district. And only about 23,000 of them are actually in a party. Or are it Democrat versus Republican. And yeah, there are 3,700 more Republicans than Democrats. But that means all of the other voters are not calling themselves blue or red. They're calling themselves, we need some help right here. And there is a lot of frustration because we're not being heard in Salem. I mean, there are well-meaning people over on the other side of the mountains who don't understand that their forests aren't our forests, and their water issues aren't our water issues, and their land use issues are not our land use issues. And what I hear from voters, independent, Republican, and Democrat, is that they're just plain frustrated. They're frustrated that everybody just seems to hide in their corners and yell at each other instead of getting stuff done. And I think that more than anything else, what we need to do is we need to be able to show them that we can actually address your problems. And that, I know you guys all know standard distribution, right? So in business, I was part of Six Sigma, and that meant that you mapped your problems, you found an average of your problems, and you went 3 standard deviations either side, and here you're going to take care of 80% of your problems. This is what people actually need. What they're hearing is this, because that raises money.
But we've been 18
this.
years Republican in this district.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time that Gene Wisnett has held this position. Like Eileen, I agree with her completely. The 3,700 or 4,000 vote difference between registered Democrats and registered Republicans is nothing. That doesn't scare me at all, because 30% of our population is non-affiliated. So those who have the effort, make the effort, have the energy to go after those folks can win. And Wyden wins in our district all the time. So it's not that it's impossible and I'm out there in a futile race for no purpose. No, either one of us can win this, and I believe we have an excellent chance this year.
Let me ask you then, because we were talking about 18 years of Republican control in that district. How would you characterize your predecessor's time in office? I'll start with you, Bill.
I think that anybody who does this job deserves some credit. It's turning out to be more demanding. I might have
This is the stage where you start realizing.
This is the point where you go, oh my God, this is bigger than I thought.
As the endorsement
However,
wears on.
this gentleman did very little to talk to the people in our district. He would occasionally come by once a year. I think the last town hall was with Senator Knopp. He was asked, why aren't you having meetings in the district? We don't get to talk to you enough. And his answer was, well, Fridays are when I do my laundry. Well, if that's the best excuse that you have, that's insufficient. All right? I think he approached a number of things in a manner that was not transparent and open and supportive of the district. When he did a gut and stuff to create a ban for this proposed bridge that would link the trail systems, that wasn't a legitimate way to manage that. He didn't talk to everyone involved. He took a lottery bill, gutted it, put his words in, kept its line in the legislative queue, and then put it forward, and fortunately it died in committee. And so anyone who isn't involved with the district, anyone who feels like they don't need to be as transparent as I think the people of the district would like and expect, then probably a change comes about, because he's created an opportunity for someone like us to come in and say, is this what you want? Wouldn't you like it done better?
I think he represented a third of his district extremely well. And I think the other 2/3 of the district deserve a voice as well. It's really important. I'm sorry, I have to go back to my experience, and I hope it's not getting boring. One of the things I learned when I got promoted to management, because I was not exactly a financial executive personality, so they decided to give me an executive coach. And a couple things that I learned, but one of the most important was diversity. And he said, you know, it's not about making sure that you have a quota of different people. It's about making sure that you have different thought and different perspective. That you have people that have strengths where you are weak, and where you can help them grow with your strengths, because then you're going to have a stronger team. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to listen to people who really, really, really hate your idea. You have to, because it's going to make your idea stronger. So by only listening to one side and serving one side, he wasn't serving the full district. I understand I have not met him personally, I've only seen him in forums, and I understand he was a very nice man, everybody really liked him. You know, he's served well in this service, and you know, we share a Tar Heel connection, so there's all of that. But you have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and represent the whole group, not just the people that think like you.
So I guess my follow-up question to this would be, what are the steps you are taking now to gauge the district's needs and wants? You can go ahead, Eileen.
Okay. You know, the best thing I'm doing right now is I'm walking like crazy. And of course right now we have to, because of the primary, we talk primarily to Democrats. But you know, there are a lot of people that are, I talked to Democrats who voted for Trump. And they voted for Trump because they were hurting. They were hurting, and they were desperate. And they were desperate for change. So that is it. That was what they decided to do. Some of them are still happy with their choice, and some of them regret their choice. But I've also been talking with independents and Republicans. And what I've been hearing over and over is just, we need to like get moving again. Because we're stalled in the water. There's this feeling of being stalled, that there isn't any growth. There is this idea that now there's all this money out here and growth is going to happen, and it's not happening. And people are not seeing the raises, and they're not seeing new jobs getting hired. So we have to talk, we have to just keep continuing to talk to all of these different people. And what I am hearing is, it's just like, I'll vote for you as long as you tell us what's going on and you tell us how you can fix our problems. And I'm hearing from Republicans. I don't care. I don't care if you're a Democrat or not. You sound like you know what you're doing. You sound like you've done this before.
Well, I think Eileen is correct in that right now what we're doing is we're using up our shoe leather. And that's a very important thing to do, because that's how you meet the people. I still think, although we think very much alike, we think a little differently than our Republican counterparts. And it's very hard to get that out. So my guess is come next week when the ballots drop and they show up at people's home, I might have met 10% of the people who are going to vote for me. Now we're only working on Democrats now because this is of course a closed primary. But that's why I'm keeping a running list of the things that I want to take to Salem. That's why I'm talking to the Kiwanis next week. Why I'll be at the League of Women Voters. Why I've joined a group in Redmond. They're starting a new foundation that is designed to help the city raise money so that they can spearhead or jumpstart new projects. Maybe they need a new park and they don't have enough money. So I'm joining that because I want to hear what the city needs. That's a big population center in District 53. And then we'll meet with people in Tumalo for house parties. We'll meet with people in Sun River for house parties. I have several set up in Bend, because there is a good part of Bend that's in District 53, Aubrey Butte and Aubrey Glen and north of Butler Market Road. All of that's District 53. So the trick is meeting the people. It's tough. Whichever one of us is still standing after the primary shifts from a primary election immediately to the general election, and that is meeting and going after votes for Republicans, Democrats, non-affiliated, and every other party in the state.
Well, you brought up the bridge, so maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm very curious about, obviously there's been 2 dead in the water efforts on that regard, but it's not going to go away. So what are your thoughts on how you move forward as the representative in that district?
That and anonymously stuffing stuff into it as it goes forward is not allowed, stuff like that.
So
Well,
I just gave you direction on what we want to hear. Jeez.
Well, I am saying that I will not support banning the bridge. Right. So there's the answer. But what I do support, because there are really good arguments on both sides, right? We in Deschutes County love recreation. We love the outdoors. I mean, that's a character. It's the heart of people in Deschutes County. We're here because that's what we do. So I really think you have to consider what's the greater good. How many people are going to be involved? Do you stop people from driving all the way around to get to this trailhead? Those are good arguments. On the other hand, the number of people that will use that trail will more than double if a bridge goes across by a number of people's estimation, and in particular the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and they're concerned about damage to the wildlife in that area. So what I support was Senator Knopf's compromise. And his compromise was build this bridge, but let's put into legislation very clearly for the future that the scenic waterway will be protected from here on out. Now, we've already been twice through public hearings where the issue was that the state scenic waterway prevents bridges. So that legislation exists. The reason that we're talking about it again is twofold. One, Parks and Recreation wants to build this bridge, and secondly, Gene Wisnett made it possible for activists to bring up the opportunity to build a bridge because of the way he brought forward this potential ban. And nothing happens until activism makes it possible to talk about that again. Well, they've done that, and so now this bridge is really in everyone's target area again. And so I'm saying build it, but I'm willing to reinforce that the scenic waterway idea was a good idea, and I don't want bridges dotting everywhere along that waterway. So that's my take on this thing.
Okay. And I am not for a law to ban this because there already is a law that bans this, and it's the Scenic Waterways Act. In reality, if for this bridge to go through, then Parks and Rec needs to get a law that amends the Scenic Waterways Act in order to have this done. And so this continually running up against the wall and demanding what is not possible under the law. And we actually now know, because Neil Gorsuch just reminded us that you don't get to frivolously enforce laws, much to the surprise of the Trump administration. There's a law there. If they want to build a bridge, they're going to have to change the law. And what I think is lost in here is what is really the desired outcome. Because we want growth in the southern district, in the southern urban growth boundary. And we want recreation opportunities in that area. Is this the only way to do that? Are we gonna, is the river the only attractive feature that we have in the Southern Growth District? Or is there something else we can do? Have we looked at connecting to Lowlands, through Lowlands, worked with the National Monument to actually have that done there? Because then we can actually build a paved bike path that connects all the way into Bend from the Sun Lava Trail up to Bend, which we don't have right now, and we wouldn't have even with this bridge. Even with the bridge, you gotta cross over, go on a dirt road, gravel, and then back in. So you still don't have a paved trail for people to take baby joggers on, or anything along those lines. So it doesn't appear to me that we've really done our homework here on the local issues and what we need to do locally. And before we start asking to create state laws to settle a fight, we need to have the parties actually be honest about what is the important outcome, what are the values that we need to meet here. If and when that happens, Bend Parks District works with the local groups to say, well, this is what the bridge will give us, and you know, here are our alternatives, and have the conservation groups and the homeowners and say, well, here are the alternatives that we see. You know, we simply haven't done that work.
You believe if they do that work, then
If they,
you'll have the outcome, because
I think
you
if
don't
we-
feel that they've already done that work.
I don't feel that they've already done that work. Not that I can see, because you don't keep running up to ask for ask to waive a law with no new argument if you've already done all of that work. And clearly there's still an argument going on. So can we connect up with the 97 route to get that done? What can we do? There's other options, and especially we need to remember there are other projects, and how does this link up with other projects, and how can we do it more effectively? If after that work is done and we look at all of these projects and say, okay, well, we need this from the state, that's the time to take a law to the state. But it doesn't make sense to pass a law saying you have to follow the law that's already on the books.
I agree with that. There is a law, but this is going to come before the legislature again. Someone's going to be asked to vote on whether or not to change that law. And this is going to happen. It's probably going to happen in the next long legislative session. And I think that there'll be a resolution. And the question is, are we willing to take that on? And what is the outcome that you want to see? And so I think I'm willing to take that on because I know it's coming. And so I've thought a whole lot about this. I've sat down with Nikki Romer and I've had discussions with all of the groups to try to figure out what it is that's going to actually be most likely to win as an outcome. And so I think there are going to be a lot of compromises made, and that's why I like Knopf's compromise. But also I think that you're going to have to consider things like closing that trail at night so that animals can have half of a day and people can have half of a day. Because if you are going to interrupt the wildlife flow, then there needs to be some sort of way to manage that. So I think in the long run, and again, one person doesn't get to choose. This will come to the legislature and it will be decided. But I think that bridge will eventually be built, and I would like it built carefully and the outcome to be managed so that we don't end up with a whole lot of unintended consequences.
We have about 5 minutes before we need to wrap up.
Okay.
I know we didn't touch on education or healthcare, which are both important elements, I believe. So I guess I'll just let each of you decide which of those you'd like to talk about. And you don't have to choose the same as her, but why don't you go ahead and just give me your kind of talking points about this.
Okay, as I told you before, in healthcare, we have a specific problem here in Deschutes County. We're 10 points below the national average in employer coverage. Part of that is caused by the fact that a quarter of our jobs are recreation, hospitality, and retail. And these are people that can cut hours so as not to pay benefits. A lot of them are out-of-state employers. And they are essentially shifting the burden onto our taxpayers. So there's a couple things that we can do. And I think one of the most important things we can do, and darn it, Merkley just stole my idea. I swear to you, I've been saying this beforehand. I would like people to be able to buy into the Oregon Health Plan. I'd like to have it based on how much money we make, basically a payroll tax, essentially, in order to get coverage. Because we have a large population in this county, in particular between 50 and 65, that are not on employer coverage. They're paying extremely high premiums for bronze plans. So, they're still, after they're paying these premiums in excess of $1,000 a month, then they also have to pay $6,500 out of pocket. This is a huge stress. The Oregon Health Plan is a much better health plan that's available, and I would like people to be able to buy in on that.
So is that something like a modified single payer system? I mean, how does that, is there a unique
actually,
little phrase that
we already pay a payroll tax for Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how Medicaid is funded. We pay a tax, and our employer pays a tax, and that all goes into the reserve to pay for our Medicaid. And I think that we can pay into. We can essentially pay a payroll tax. It's just pulled right out of our checks, and we get our coverage and enroll in the Oregon Health Plan from there. But I think another thing to remember is there are a significant number of jobs in this county where taxpayers are subsidizing employers. And I think it's fair to invite those employers to contribute to our healthcare issues. In Measure 101, I know that Julie Parrish made a big thing about Intel and Nike aren't getting taxed, so it's not fair. Well, Intel and Nike are self-insured. They pay their employees health care out of their own profits. They are contributing. They are not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the employers that are not contributing.
We got to move on just to let them have
Okay,
one
I'm going
last.
to try to hit both of them in 2 minutes. I am a strong proponent of health care for all. I think that it's important because it affects so much. If you had health care for all, then you would remove that from the negotiations between employers and employees in the state. You would reduce or you would improve the health of all of the citizens, and it would go a long way to reducing sort of the overuse of emergency rooms. Healthcare for All Oregon is a group that has been pursuing this for a long time, and they have put out a video where they had an analysis done last year that shows that for the same money that the state and the government are now spending for people's health care in Oregon, we can have health care for all. No new money. All right. Big changes, let me tell you. I seem to think in ways that lead me to walking into the fire. But you have to take on big issues to solve big problems. With education, there are a couple of things we could do much better. I'm a long-time educator, that's my career, mostly in higher ed, but what's missing in our education system that makes us third from the bottom in graduation rates? For one thing, we don't validate what our students learn before going on to the next information. So how do you fix that? You do things like problem-based learning. Providing the information first and then using the class time to actually do problems and do work and validate that the students learn something before you move on, and then the student finds that, well, okay, I got stoned last night, so I didn't get my stuff ready. Now I'm behind.
So would you
and
propose
next
like a
time you'd be
legislative
further
system
behind.
there? I mean, how would that work? You would legislate?
I think you make it optional. I think you make it another way that you educate teachers to teach.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you can do, and this could be done legislatively, is that instead of testing to assess how well schools are doing, I'd like to write legislation to move us to a peer-reviewed assessment system. So rather than constant quantitative testing, we would bring in educators from other districts from other parts of the state and share what they do well and what they're having troubles with. And we use those peer monitors to come in and look at a school system and say, yeah, you're doing something really well here, or you're doing something very poorly here. And instead of using the tests as for punishment, we bring in reviewers and provide mechanisms that improve what's going on. I better quit.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
carried away. I can go on for that. With
I
that for a
think,
long time.
we have, I can give you each 1 minute to wrap up, just the last words. So we should
I'll
just
let you go first.
go ahead, Bill.
First, thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you and share ideas. It's this sort of thing that makes it really an opportunity for us to get out and reach people that we couldn't reach. I think experience is huge. The fact that I've written legislation, reviewed legislation, I think is useful. And I'm going to focus on things that I think solve big problems for Oregon. So that's where I'm going, and I'm going to just work on it as hard as I can until there's a reason for me not to do that, or I'm in Salem trying to solve them. Thank you.
Also, thank you for inviting me today. And we have some serious challenges in Oregon. We have big problems to solve. And my experience has been helping people solve their problems, breaking them down, financing them, arguing back and forth, give and take. No one person is going to get this done. It has to be a group. And it has to be supported by the people of District 53. So we really need to work across lines, listen to each other, and come up with the best possible solutions. And we need somebody in Salem who is willing to say, hey, yeah, we agree about this, but guess what? We don't agree about this, and you need to listen to us. Because our view matters too. We are part of this state, and we deserve to be heard. So I want to go to I want to go to Salem, and I want to represent Central Oregon there, and I want to help us get things done and paid for. We can pay for these things. We're smart people, you know. But these are hard problems. These are hard problems, and we can't keep pretending that they're not hard problems, or that we can just cut our way out of it, because we can't. Not and still have the state we love.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
We have another one lined up right
Okay.
after.
Oh my gosh.
Republican challengers.
Give you these
wow.
because there's
Yeah.
information
Well,
on
then
how
that
to
should be
get
fun.
more
Yeah,
information
that's
about
awesome.
it.
No, I'll be calling you about
Do you know
the.
Oh, yes, I do. Exactly.
Oh,
I
fantastic.
just spent a whole hour and a half talking